Thank you all for coming. But hello, my name is Adina Gourmet, and I'm your senior class vice president. Sean Kurz, the president, Jabil Rice, our chief marshal, as well as our senior class marshals, are really excited that you're here tonight. We hope everyone has enjoyed the festivities of Senior Week. I know I'm getting really emotional and sentimental. First of all, we would like to thank the General Alumni Association for sponsoring this event. The concept of a last lecture became nationally recognized in 2007 with Dr. Randy Pausch, who gave his last lecture speech at Carnegie Mellon. Pausch conceived of the lecture after he learned that his pancreatic cancer was terminal. We continue this tradition of a last lecture at UNC. This is an opportunity for a member of the faculty or administration to share their reflection from their life's journey and speak to seniors as if it was their last lecture ever. Dr. Brian Hogan is a teaching professor of chemistry and the director of the Carolina Covenant and Achieve Scholars Program. He received his bachelor's degree from Trenton State College in 1996 and his PhD from Carolina in 2003. Since 2004, he has been teaching all levels of biochemistry, molecular biology, genetics, and general chemistry. He is a 9-time Teaching Award recipient, including 3 Tanner Teaching Awards for Excellence in Undergraduate Teaching, a Chapman Teaching Award, the 2018 NACADA Outstanding Faculty Advisor Award, and the Robert E. Bryan Award for Public Service. Dr. Hogan is recognized nationally and internationally for his work in community-engaged scholarship, improving graduation rates for students from low socioeconomic backgrounds, and for developing STEM-focused mentoring programs for 6th through 8th graders. He is also the proud father of 2 children who are here today. Dr. Hogan's favorite book is the Harry Potter series. His favorite is Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince, and he thinks J.K. Rowling is a genius. Dr. Hogan is afraid of heights and massive big box stores like Super Target. I'm honored to introduce Dr. Brian Hogan.
Wow, when I hear somebody read my resume to me, it actually makes me feel like I've accomplished something in life. When the General Alumni Association and the graduating class wanted to have a last lecture, they wanted somebody who would say something grandly inspirational and to help guide you, through this next phase of your life, which can often be difficult. And they wanted somebody who started at point A and got to point Z and has really done everything that they need to be absolutely successful. So they asked Dr. Hogan, Dr. Kelly Hogan, and unfortunately she wasn't able to do it. So as I explained to my biochem class today, I played varsity basketball, and I was a 30-30-30 man, up by 30, down by 30, 30 seconds left. That's when I got in the game. So I got the call, and here I am. What I'm going to try and talk about is maybe a little bit of the feelings that you have today, and I'm going to reflect back on my life's journey. My wife and I have been together for a very long time. In fact, we've been together for 23 years, 11 months, and 7 days, which is 7,555,000 seconds. We met in college, and Kelly is really the exemplar for me of, if you want to be successful, you follow these steps, here's the recipe, and everything goes well. I, on the other hand, took a more circuitous route, and I've often felt like I've been a bit of a terminal screw-up in many, many ways. So let's begin, shall we? I'm not going to go way, way back, but I'm going to go back to college. So I grew up in New Jersey, in Boonton, New Jersey, and I went to a meh high school where, education was really secondary to going to basketball practice. I was not an all-star student, but I happened to get into a very good small liberal arts college called Trenton State College. And I grew up with my mom and my sister and my brother. My mom was a secretary, and she worked in Manhattan. She got up super early in the morning and got home late at night. And she told all of her children, you need to go to college, period. So I went to college, and I had no skills to be really successful at college, because what did I know about college? For example, I went to my first English literature class. I had Dr. Bainey, and I actually said out loud, "How does this doctor get time away from her medical practice to teach us writing?" That's how stupid I was. But I had never met a college professor. I had never met somebody with a PhD. I had no idea what I was supposed to do in life. And not having those skills, or not really knowing many people who had gone to college and hanging out with PhD types, I immediately got to college and I realized that my high school education had run out. The day I stepped onto campus, I looked around and everyone seemed better looking and shinier, and they had their acts together, and I thought, well, this is it, I'm screwed. It will take a matter of weeks before they realize what a terrible and tragic phony I am, and then I'll be thrown out of college. And in sort of a self-fulfilling prophecy, I went on to bomb my first general chemistry exam. Like really bomb it. Not like you think of bombing an exam, like a 72. I'm talking like a 20. And then I said, oh, I'll show general chemistry, and I stopped going to class. And bombed the second one. And importantly, I learned a nice lesson there, which was sometimes you need to ask for help. And I was never good at asking for help because I fancied myself to be the New Jersey version of like Johnny Cash's song, A Boy Named Sue. You know, he grew up quick and he grew up mean, and his fists got hard and his wits got keen. It's about a kid who grows up tough. His dad names him Sue so he can, you know, be tough, and then the dad skips town. But that's not really how it went. But nevertheless, as I went through college, I had some really great individuals point things out to me like, hey, Brian, you can do this. You're a fairly smart guy. You have some insights, you have some abilities, and you should really nurture those. And I was very defensive. I was very insular, and I really recoiled from that. And one of the reasons why I did that, I think, has a lot to do with how I grew up and my family situation. So I was always very defensive. I wanted to keep everybody at arm's length. And that was the early 90s, and that was the grunge era. So the music was loud and it was angry, and it fit my personality at that time because I was kind of an angry lad. And I came up with a slogan when I was in college that went something like this: anger, alcohol, and cigarettes should fuel you through your 20s. That was like my life code right there. That's not a good way to live your life, okay? So big takeaway from the first 3 minutes of this is that's not a helpful way to live your life. I made a bunch of mistakes when I was in college, and I managed to live through all of them. One of the most important things that I learned was that there are going to be people in my life that were going to help me get to where I needed to go, and that I should listen to them. In addition, when I was, I guess it was our first year in college, there was this really sweet gal in Bio 101, and she was the smartest person in the class. And Dr. Albert Ebel pointed her out and said, you should all endeavor to be as smart as the young and lovely Kelly Lee here. And I looked back and was like, whatever, Kelly Lee, I'm going to smoke you on this next exam. But you are empirically good looking. Fast forward, took another couple of years to get her to go on a date with me because I ran with a pretty wild crowd and I wouldn't have dated me either. But we went on a group date, and I passed that one. And then I asked her to go to a Cinco de Mayo party, and the rest is history, sort of. I learned a lot from Kelly, who was then my girlfriend and is now my wife. I learned to start believing that I had the ability to do something with my life. She was an absolutely stellar student. I had never made straight A's in college until I met Kelly, and then she taught me how to study, and suddenly my grades started to go up. And right around senior year, I had this massive freak out. I was right about everybody who's in this crowd's age, with the exception of my children. And I started to get really, really afraid because we were about to graduate college. And it seemed like everybody out there had an awesome plan. Like they were going to go to medical school and dental school, and that person had a job, and so had the high-paying such and such. And I was just like, oh my gosh. I started comparing my insides to other people's outsides, as I like to say, like thinking of my own self-worth by measuring it against other people. And that wasn't really very useful because that leads to things like, self-loathing. And if you think back to my anger, alcohol, and cigarettes mantra, not a lot of good decisions. But luckily I had Kelly, and she said, listen, we both want to go to graduate school, so let's go to graduate school together. I said, great. She applied to University of North Carolina. I applied to NC State. She got into the University of North Carolina. I got into NC State. Kelly went to the University of North Carolina. I broke up with her and moved to Arizona and went to the University of Arizona. Big mistake number one. Or maybe that was big mistake number 5. When you find that person who is that person, don't break up with them. Luckily, I spent 1 semester in Tucson as a graduate student, and I was not in a great place, both physically and mentally. I had this really awful, decrepit, single studio apartment. I didn't even have furniture. Like, it was really awful. I used a palm frond as a broom. It was pathetic, and I was smoking a pack of cigarettes a day, and I just thought, well, this is it. I can't do graduate school. I need to get the hell out of here, and I'm terribly afraid that my life is crumbling. So what do? I will pack up all my stuff, and I will run again. So there's a common theme here. When I was graduating from college, I was greatly afraid. I was afraid of the future. I was afraid of commitment. I was afraid of what people thought about me. So I packed up my stuff and I ran. Then I went to Arizona. Things weren't going as well as I thought they should go. I was terribly afraid that I wasn't measuring up to other people's expectations. Everybody else seemed to have it going on, and I didn't. So I packed up my stuff and I ran. There are lots of problems in life that you can run away from. But what I learned was when the problem's between your 2 ears, you can't run away from that one. So I came back and I said to Kelly, I know that you don't have any reason in the world to take me back, but I'd really like another chance, please. And she said, well, you cut your hair and comb the sweet tarts out of your beard, and maybe I'll give you a shot. And luckily she took me back, but it was on like a contingency basis. I had to earn my way back into her life. I worked for several years as a biochemist. That's where I learned to be a biochemist. That's all the skills that I ever learned came from all the people who were around me in this laboratory experience. And what I began to discover was that I had some really great skills. They weren't necessarily the best, academic type skills, but they were really good hands-on skills. And I often say to my students, on average, we're all average, but in our own special way. Like, I stunk at cultural anthropology, but I'm a pretty damn good biochemist. There's not a gene I can't clone or a protein I can't purify. I can't balance my checkbook. I can't pay bills on time, but I'm a pretty damn good biochemist. And I got okay with that there are certain things in life that I'm good at, that I'm qualified to do, and I should start believing in those skills. unfortunately, all those years of kind of negative thinking and negative living left me in a place where I was constantly feeling that, starting back in college and going through graduate school, and I dropped out of graduate school, and then I had a job. I got laid off from a job, and I started to feel like, oh boy, Hogan, you do have some skills, but you also have a tendency to screw up in a major way, quite catastrophically at times. And Kelly convinced me that it was time probably for me to go back to graduate school. So I went back to graduate school here at Carolina, and I completed my PhD, which was an incredible miracle that I somehow got through that. It was a tremendous amount of hard work, and at the same time, we got married, and we started thinking about having a family. And I thought being an undergraduate was hard, and then I wasn't one anymore, and I was in the real world being an adult, and I thought that was really hard, and then I thought grad school was kind of hard, but that didn't prepare me for what was going to come next. I wish somebody had told me that what you need to do, Brian, is to stop worrying about what other people think about you and stop comparing your insides to other people's outsides. Believe in yourself and really believe in yourself, not just this phony every once in a while, yeah, well, okay, I'm good enough, I'm smart enough, and people like me. But no, really getting honest with oneself about what it takes to be a normal grown-up. One of the big events that helped shape the way that I think was when my son was born. When my son was born, it was wonderful and joyous, but we had a moment where postnatally Kelly was bleeding really intensely. We had to go to the ER multiple times, and I was really, really scared. I was incredibly frightened, and I was wondering why can't these people help me, And it was going downhill really fast, and I had an eight-day-old child, Jake, and the doctor said to me, "Listen, Brian, we're taking Kelly in the other room. If there's anything you need to say to your wife, you should probably say it now." And I was like, oh my God. And I remember what I said to Kelly. I said, "Kelly, please don't die, because I can't do this alone." Because I was afraid. I was really afraid. What was my life going to be like without the person who I wanted to spend the rest of my life with? And you would think that after an episode like that I would change my whole life philosophy and start being more positive and being thankful for every day that I was on Earth. Now if you're in my class, you hear me say really like happy things like, oh, if you spend 1 foot in yesterday and 1 foot in tomorrow, all you do is crap on today. Well, I mean it, because it's important, right? Like, living for today is important. We were fortunate enough to adopt our second child, Lexi, and being a dad, nobody really prepared me for that. I grew up without a dad, so that was really very difficult. And so what came back into my life, I don't know, I'm like 30 years old or something like that, and I have a PhD, and I have a job, and I've got 2 kids, and my wife is fabulous and doing awesomely at work, and empirically, things are going really well from the outside. However, all of that self-doubt that I felt back when I was 21 or 22 started to creep back in slowly, and it was like this poison that I couldn't shake. There was no antidote. I just kept thinking, I'm failing as a grown-up, like I'm failing as a father, I'm failing as an employee, I'm failing as a husband, and everybody's going to realize that I'm really a terrific phony, and I'm going to get fired from every aspect of my life. Wife will leave me, children will hate me, I don't know, state will fire me. And I'm not going to go into all the gory details, but I made some more mistakes. And as you get older, the stakes get quite a bit higher. And I needed to make some significant mistakes in my life because I needed to figure out that the way that I was thinking was not really productive to living a good and honest life. And I can't believe that that I'm going to say some of the things that I'm about to say, because if 21-year-old Brian heard 45-year-old Brian say these kinds of things, 21-year-old Brian would never stop punching 45-year-old Brian. Like, I had no tolerance for these, you know, very positive platitudes that I'm about to lay on you. So take them with a grain of salt, okay? But what I recognized during this period in my life in my early 30s was that all that negative thinking was not really very useful. And comparing myself to other people, measuring my self-worth based on other people's affirmations of me, or the medals and the monuments that you collect as you go around in life, that really wasn't important, and it didn't make me feel any better about myself. Maybe it's because I'm Irish and I'm Catholic that I have this great tendency to go straight to self-deprecation and self-flagellation. Like, I'm really great at beating myself up for insignificant things. But what I've realized in my life is that no amount of self-flagellation ever made me feel any better about myself. Like, it never did me any good to continue to whip myself over doing the stupid things that I did in the past. And at some point in my life, I had to really get honest and say, Brian, you got to get over what happened in the past. Give up on having a better past. You just got to give it up, because you can't change what happened in the past. And all of those things that I regretted that I did when I was younger than you and your age, like, they happened. I learned from them, but it didn't do me any good to beat myself up over it anymore. Some of the other things that I learned around this time was that my brain is a pretty frightening place. Like, I'm a smart guy, but I can be really, really stupid. And I like to think of it as half my brain manufactures bullshit, and the other half of my brain buys it. All right? And so the more I am left alone by myself to think, the outcome is generally pretty negative. So what I try and do is, I'm fortunate enough that I have a job where I get to be around people all the time. I get to go to college every day. Like, I never really wanted to work. I never wanted to have a job. I just wanted to keep going to college because it was really awesome. See, being a college professor seemed like the best job in the world because it didn't really seem like a bunch of work. So I remembered back to something I learned when I was in an English literature class. We were talking about, I can't remember what type of religion we were talking about, but it was very impactful. But it was, do one thing and do it well in life. And don't fight the current, but rather let the gentle stream of life, float you down in whatever direction it may be and carry you gently on to whatever path it is that you're supposed to go on. And I remember learning that and being like, well, that's stupid, because even dead fish can float downstream. But now I realize, duh, Brian, it's really fantastic to have a job that isn't really a job. I get to be around you all, and I get to be of service. So for me, one of the most important things that I learned after my post-college years was, if I'm feeling awful about myself or something, the best thing that I can do is be of service to other folks. So one of the things that I truly believe it makes me a happy and positive person and somebody that's worth being around is service. Being of service to my students, being of service to my family, being of service to my community. The more that I can get engaged and stop thinking about myself, the better off I'm going to be. When I was preparing these remarks, I wrote down like every little Brian Hogan-ism that I could think of, and I believe that I have said most of them. But as you go off, I'll finish with this. As you go off into this next phase of your life, I want you to know that it's okay to be scared. The real grown-up adult world is not necessarily awesomely fun. Your first job might be meh, awful maybe. You might get passed over for that promotion you really thought you were going to get. You might not get a raise. That really great guy or gal that you've been with might leave you. Like, oh, this is a tough time in the next few years. Potentially. It could also be the most fabulous and awesome next, few years of your life, and everything could be fantastic. But it might not be. And in this world that's ever changing and Instagrammable and Facebookable and with the Twitter and everything, people post nonstop about how awesome it is, and here's a selfie of me saving squirrels or curing cancer. Yeah, but don't compare your insides to other people's outsides. Do what you want to do because it's the next right thing. It's the right thing to do. And one of my students, I found a thank you card from her, and she's a student who, when she came to Carolina, she was in the Merit Scholars Program, and she came to me and she said, "Dr. Hogan, I'm doing terrible in physics." And we had a very long talk about physics, and I said, "Can you just define terrible for me?" And she said, "I'm getting a 74. I said, "Okay, this is a very different conversation." And I said, "Student," I'm not going to say her name, C's get degrees too, right?" And she looked at me like, "What the hell is wrong with you? I've never gotten a C before in my life." And I think she harbored a resentment towards that for a few years. But upon graduation, she wrote something that eventually was picked up by something that Carolina published. And her quote was this, that Dr. Hogan taught me that failure is relative, students are much more than their GPA, and C's do get degrees. And that's a student who lives. What makes that quote all the more important is that is a student who I think exemplifies some of the things I've tried to summarize here about living every day like it's your last, because that's a student who lives every day of her life with cystic fibrosis. And she really does live every day like it's the last day of her life. And I'm so proud of where she's gone, and I'm proud of the role that somehow I've been able to play in her life. As you go on in your lives, look to be a mentor. Find people around you that you can help lift up. When you see somebody who's doing a great job, let them know they're doing a great job. When you're out in the work world, people often tell you what a crappy job you're doing. But when somebody's doing a great job, elevate them. If you find yourself in a situation where, I'll just use me as an example because, well, you chose me. And I'm not all that important, but I'm all that I think about. there there are some important decisions that one makes in one's life. And one of the most important decisions you may choose to make is to spend the rest of your life with another human being. So I asked Kelly to marry me a long time ago. And we've been together, as I said, for 23 years, 11 months, and 7 days. And one of the things that I've learned so many things from Kelly. Kelly is my wife. Kelly is a teaching professor of biology. She's the author of 2 textbooks. She's nationally and internationally recognized for her work in higher education. She's an awesome mother and parent. She has an inexhaustible amount of energy. The woman doesn't need to sleep. Like there's us, and then there's people like Kelly. All right, she's in a completely different category. And there was this really interesting point in our lives and in our careers where I realized that I wasn't the big kahuna. It was Kelly that was the big kahuna. And I consciously had to make a choice. Was I going to feel bad for myself that I, as the man in this relationship, was not, the breadwinner and the big kahuna? And what I decided to do was just put my ego aside and be like, well, why would you be so afraid of supporting your wife? Like, you're in this together for the rest of your lives, so you might as well support them, right? And that's what I did. And if you've been in my class, you hear me joke about Kelly and how I always feel like I'm second fiddle to Kelly. And actually, I am second fiddle to Kelly based on today. But if and when you make that decision to be with somebody for the rest of your lives, boy, be there to support that person and to elevate them. So and put your ego aside. That's absolutely, to me, that's one of the most important things that I've learned, particularly in the past few years. I'll say this: when I listened to my intro, I thought, wow, that guy's really done a lot. And there's a lot of things that I've been involved in that I haven't really asked for. And I would encourage you to think about, as you go through your careers, be careful what you ask for. I thought that I was going to be a lot better at doing certain things in my career than I turned out to be. I have spent 4 wonderful years being the director of the Carolina Covenant, which is a fabulous program. And what I realized at some point was that I've taken it as far as I possibly can, and it's time for me to step aside and let a real grown-up come in and run the show. And it was a hard decision to make, but I recognized that I had my own limits, and I had gotten to the absolute end of my skill set. Remember, on average, we're all average, but in our own special way. And it was time for me to step aside, put my ego aside, and let somebody else run the show. And um, the world will keep spinning, and I will go back to my creepy little office in chemistry, and I will teach a lot of chemistry to a lot of really awesome students. The last thing that I will say is this was something that I heard from a guy named Joe Collins. He started a nonprofit organization called From Houses to Homes in Guatemala. And he started it literally with like $11 in his pocket. And when he was visiting Guatemala, and he recognized that there were these large groups of individuals, primarily indigenous folks, who lived in terrific poverty, and they didn't have homes. So he saw an injustice, and he said, I think we can do better. So he started this nonprofit organization called From Houses to Homes, and they have built over 1,000 homes for families. And Joe passed away, unfortunately, from cancer a few years ago. But he said this to me one time. He said, Brian, you need to remember 4 things: dream big, go slow, listen to others, and believe in yourself. What he actually said was dream big, go slow, listen to others, and to thine own self be true. Always believe in yourself. And sometimes believing in yourself can be the most difficult thing that you have to do every day. So, me, being as dumb as I am, I got it tattooed on my leg so that every day of my life when I wake up, I get to look at my leg and remember, oh yeah, believe in yourself today, Brian. I hope that you got something out of this. I hope there was some useful nugget of 45-year-old guy wisdom. Um, I encourage you, if you are feeling squirrely for some reason and you feel like you need to talk to like a real professional, to go and talk with somebody. But it might be somebody, a mentor that you trust. It might be somebody over in wellness. It might be somebody over at CAPS. It might be one of your professors. This is a tough time, and I just want all of you to remember to make make every day worth it, because you're all worth it. Thanks for your time.
We have a little gift for you, Dr. Hogan.
Thanks, Sean.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. All right. Dr. Hogan, we would like to thank you so much for. Oh, you can feel free to have a seat. Sorry. Dr. Hogan, we would like to thank you so much for such inspiring and entertaining words. We know it will serve us well as we leave behind our beloved Chapel Hill, especially these messages about believing in ourselves and following the pathway that we're meant to pursue. I think those lessons are going to be super important as we're moving into these next steps. So thank you so much for sharing that. If there is one thing I've learned during my time at Carolina, is that so much can change in just 4 short years. This time 4 years ago, we were all newly admitted students, trying to figure out which orientation session to pick, who our roommates would be, what our first semester of college would look like, and what dorm we would live in. 4 years at Carolina have graced us with the best and worst of times: the win of a national championship, the loss of the beloved Dean Smith, and the honor of one of our esteemed professors receiving a Nobel Peace Prize in chemistry. Through every single up and down, we grew closer as a community, thriving in the Carolina spirit. But what is this Carolina spirit? You can find it in the water of the old well, on the first day of classes, or in the cheers and screams of students rushing Franklin Street after a Duke win against Duke. You know what I mean. You can find it in the harmonies of the alma mater sung by fellow Tar Heels, and the shared struggle of tripping over bricks on campus, which happens to me far too often. You can find it in the chatter amongst the pit and in the sweet ringing of our bell tower. It fills the spring air during beautiful days in the quad and falls down in snowflakes during the snowball fights at Keenan Stadium. But most importantly, it lives in each and every one of us, just as it does in the alumni before us and in each and every student that will follow. As I look in the crowd here today, I'm inspired by the leaders and future innovators of our world that I see before me. And I thank Carolina for the people that has helped us become. When we process into Keenan Stadium on May 12th, we will join the ranks of the countless treasured alumni who sat through the very same classes we have in these last 4 years, and will continue to proceed through our lives as influencers and earthshakers in our newfound professions, always carrying the love and tradition of the great university within us. So, in closing, I would like to recognize the people that made this amazing event possible. First of all, I would like to thank all the senior marshals. While all the marshals couldn't be here tonight, we have a really incredible group of 50 talented seniors who dedicated their love to Carolina, to making this incredible senior year happen and have all the wonderful events that we've had throughout the year. So once again, thank you all for coming tonight, and I wish you luck in the future, and I hope to see you all on Franklin Street tomorrow night. So in closing, I'd like us to all stand and sing the alma mater. NCU, NCU, hail to the brightest star of all. Clear its radiance shine. Carolina, priceless gem.
receive all praises thine. Thank you all so much. Have a wonderful night.